Welcome into the Nittany Game Week podcast, the mid-season edition, as we're about to hit 6 straight weeks, 6 straight Saturdays of Penn State football. Boy, we're going to know a lot more about this team and about where they're headed in just a couple of weeks. Todd Sadowski, Jay Paterno, Tom Bradley. Let's get right into it. Camp Randall, night game at Wisconsin. Not an easy place to play. Your thoughts on this particular matchup?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, but it is loud, it is crazy, and their noise level is definitely elite.
It's a lot of fun if you win the game. It's not so much fun if you don't. But I'll tell you, it's a great atmosphere. The atmosphere will be one of the best you play in. The fan base is great. They know their football. They love their football. They love their team. It's an exciting night. They
started the season there 3 years ago for a big noon kickoff, this time under the lights in late October. Going to be madness, and that's a team that's kind of hitting their stride. So the fans know this win over a number 3 Penn State team would be massive for their season and really catapult the Badgers. For Penn State, they're just trying to hang on, survive another road atmosphere like this, and then get home to Ohio State. So a tough road ahead for Penn State. Let's talk about the second half, not in more of a general sense, but let's talk about both sides of the ball. So we'll talk about offense first. What could work? What should work the rest of the year that has worked in the first half? For me, a couple of things that come to mind is mixing up of the tempo. I love it when they come to the line of scrimmage with 2 different plays, and you never know when that's going to happen, and they get right into that mixing up the tempo. And I think Nick Singleton out of the backfield really creates matchup problems when he's going to catch the ball. That may need to happen because you're going to face some tough defenses. If you have trouble running the ball, you've got to get it in his hands at some point. Katron Allen also able to catch the ball. Jay, from an offensive side of the ball, I know where you're going. You're going straight to 44 probably.
No.
But you know, talk about
answer.
Right. Talk about what should be successful that has worked already the first 6 games.
I think the key is going to be what do they do in the run game, because they ran the ball really well the first 4 weeks. The last 2 weeks had some trouble. UCLA didn't run the ball really well. They didn't run the ball well against USC. I think people are saying, okay, we're not going to let you run the ball. We're going to try and make this a passing game for you. And I think what you're going to get now is what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get some production. And we'll talk about this in the scouting report. You're going to have to get some production from the wideouts, downfield threatening. I mean, for example, Tom and I talked this morning. You look at the Steelers when Russell Wilson came in, he started throwing the streaks on the outside, and they started beating the Jets on Monday night. That changed the whole game. Penn State has not done that. I think they're going to have to, because people are going to say, we're going to take 44 out of the game as best we can. You can't totally shut him down. I mean, he's going to. And then we're going to try and take the run game away and see if you guys can beat us one-on-one outside. I think that's going to be the big thing going forward.
Defensively, it's always about the 3 no's. No big plays, no missed tackles, no missed assignments. If they can make people work and they have to grind to get a score on them and, get in that situation, they're going to be tough to beat, because I think they're awful good on defense.
So let's go.
And Todd, just on another note, I mean, I've seen live now. I've seen Ohio State in person. I've seen Washington in person on defense. They are going to really challenge you on the edge in the secondary. They have big people that can run in the secondary. Washington may be 4-3, but they're a top 10 defense as you look down the stretch. So they're going to play some really good defensive football teams. So they're going to have to make those plays.
All right, I want to go back to defense for a second, Tom, about what's been going on with defense, where they've made great second half adjustments and they've really been able to shut teams down. But that comes on the heels of a slow start in the first half. So 2 questions to that is, how do second half adjustments get made? You don't have a ton of time at halftime, but you get a chance to talk about it. And there's a stark difference between what's been happening in the second half and first half, and why the slow start, and how do you correct that?
Well, the one thing, let's talk about the slow start, because you don't want it to become a phobia, like, oh, we're always a slow starting team. It becomes a mindset then. Oh, no, you can't do that. You're going to talk about it, address it. But what's going to happen is those adjustments are being made while the game's going on in the first half. It's not like you wait till halftime. You're getting communication upstairs. You're writing things down. You're talking to your players on the side when they come out. Hey, here's what's happening. We've got to make these adjustments. So some people think, oh, you wait till halftime. No, it's every series when they come out. There's communication going on. And so that's one of the things I think they've done a good job. But the one thing they don't want to do is, if they want to continue this streak, is get too far behind in where they're playing catch up, because that's with that great running game, that's what makes them very effective on offense, being able to run the ball and throw it, not just have to throw it, to play catch up.
And I think one of the things that's different this year, and having talked to some coaches in different places, everybody is still trying to figure out how to use the iPads. They're getting video in real time so they can show kids things on the sidelines. How effectively you do that is going to be really critical because you have that technology, but it's a learning curve for the guys. Now, staffs that have NFL guys, which they're going to have some of those coming, those guys they have the experience using that stuff. When you look at Washington's staff, they've got a bunch of NFL guys, so they'll have a little bit of advantage of that. But I think that's been a learning process too. And I know James has talked about that, and other coaches have talked about, being too reliant on it or not reliant enough. Guys at UCLA said, there's also are people filming signals now that you have video in real time? So, I mean, it's a whole different world with the iPad stuff now, or tablets, whatever they're using.
Whatever they call them, tablets, iPads.
I don't know if they're officially iPads or if they're Microsoft tablets or what the sponsorship deal is, but they're using technology on the sideline that they haven't had.
I think the other thing, too, is you have to know your players and how you communicate to them, because you don't talk to every guy the same way. Yeah. So some guys might need the tablet more, other guys not so much. So that's going to be the key thing to me, is how you communicate to the players.
Well, right, and then what they communicate to each other too, because that's a leadership role that you got to have those players that you can trust with, give them information, and obviously there's certain guys you can give more info to, and certain different types of personalities that you go with.
That's
right?
a really good point you make, because a lot of times players will give you I got it, and then one of the teammates will talk to him aside and say, "You don't really have it, do you? Let me explain it to you what he means by that." So sometimes it's just different people talking, communicating in different ways. The bottom line is, hey, let's just get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the defensive point of it, they had mentioned before with the tablets, the iPads, and communication in general, with defense, you're not as huddled up as much. It can be difficult to get it from one end of the field to the other, to get it to the guy. So it's still a work in progress, and you still continue to try and fine-tune it.
That's a good point, because the communication is really key. You got to make sure you're all on the same page, because that's, you can goof up a little bit maybe up front, okay, but boy, in the secondary, no, sir. That's a killer.
So kind of taking those 2 points and going to the third one is about intangibles. Penn State has something special working. They're undefeated, one of the rare teams in college football. Few teams in college football still undefeated, and they have a chance to really go and do something special. It takes intangibles to do that. It isn't just X's and O's. It isn't just, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you need a big drive. They got one at USC to get that game in hand. You need special players. Tyler Warren, we mentioned. Teams are going to try and scheme him. They're going to try and take him out of the game. Good luck with that. But then you find other ways to utilize him or the people that are around him. With the championship teams that you guys have been around or have seen, watched, observed, or just coached, what are those intangibles that you look for that have stepped up in big moments, whether it's the last 3 games, whether it's in just the championship game itself, Big Ten, whatever it may be, that you look for and would expect Penn State to look for and have in order to kind of finish out a championship run?
I think you talk to anybody who's been associated with a great championship team, intelligence is a major factor. Guys know what they're doing, and they have the ability to process things on their own, number one. Number two, a genuine care and selflessness. In '94, third down, Mike Archie would come off the bench. Kajan would go to the sideline because Mike was a better receiver. Kajan was okay with it. Genuine love for one another, I think, are critical. But I think in every championship team, if you're going to go undefeated, and again, it's a different world now because you can, even though Texas lost, they still can get in the playoff. Even though Georgia has lost, they can get in the playoff. If Penn State were to lose a game down the stretch, they can still get in the playoff. So it's a little different that you don't have to go undefeated like you did in the past. But at some point in a critical game, the head coach is the guy that comes down and says, "Hey, Tom, I want this blitz," or "Jay, think about this play," or "You're not getting this done. Make this adjustment." If you looked at the Ohio State Oregon game, Dan Lanning did something with 12 men on the field that was a head coach injecting himself in the game at a key moment strategically that had something that changed that game. That's something that often comes in these stretch runs like this.
The other thing in the stretch runs that I've always felt watching the great teams that we had up there was it was team goals over individual preferences. And when you can get the guys to buy into that, and I've seen it times where there's certain guys that have had to take a step back in order for us to move ahead. I watch it happen on all those championship teams, because some guys are going to be asked to do something that maybe that's not what they're comfortable with. okay? But the team needs him to do it, whether it's switching positions, playing a technique a different way, doing those, maybe even stepping back and taking a back seat for a younger guy who's going to play and not be a distraction to the team because you're not playing as much as you want to.
And I think to that point, Tyler Warren's taking snaps at quarterback. Prabula's taking snaps at quarterback. I think Singleton's even taking some snaps at quarterback along with Allard. And so you've seen signs of that we're cool because we're just, if Tyler's in there in the red zone throwing a touchdown pass, doesn't matter if he throws a touchdown pass. If Prabula runs it in, we're okay with that. If somebody makes a mistake, we're okay. So I think you've seen some of those signs, and that's a good sign for the rest of the way.
And the person I was going to bring up was Julian Fleming. I mean, here's a guy who was the number 1 recruit coming out of Pennsylvania, number 3 recruit in the country out of 2020, came back home to Pennsylvania. He's not the featured receiver per se, where he's getting a lot of targets, but look who comes up big on 2 fourth-down situations at USC. So Julian Fleming is a guy that I would mention in that vein as well. Defensively, you look at those guys like Kevin Winston hasn't been on the field, but he's there. He's helping. He's coaching up the guys. He's doing what he needs to do. And look, we talk about championship runs. Sure, a national championship, if they can be in that picture, fantastic. But as you guys know, it's goals. You have goals before that. You're trying to just check off wins, as many wins as you can get. Try and get to the Big Ten championship. If that's what your goal is right now, just try and get yourself to that top 2 position since they don't have divisions, and then you go from there. You got to just qualify for the playoff, and then potentially have a chance for that. So I think that's our point: is look for those intangibles in not just the players, but in the coaching staff, and then in just the general overall feel. It kind of exudes confidence or exudes something special about a certain group of people, doesn't it?
Yep.
You can sense it on the field. You can feel it when you're out there, because a lot of times when you're going to be in that, everybody thinks it's the star guys. It's not necessarily just the star guys. Okay, there's other guys that they make their contributions and they understand their role, which is very important.
All right, let's get to the fan question that we got. We went with one because we're going to dive pretty deep into it, and it's a really good question. It comes from Joe. The Big Ten race is the subject. With half of the season done, where does the Big Ten race stand? So we did a little bit of research, focusing on the Big Ten teams with 1 or 0 losses in conference play.
Right.
And a lot of these are still going to go head-to-head. And, with 18 teams, not everybody plays everybody, and some people have a little easier road than other teams. And it's interesting because weird things happen.
Yeah.
Weird things happen in the Big Ten. It happens in all kinds of conferences. We mentioned last week Iowa. They got a pretty easy road. Iowa usually trips up some weird game. Well, sure enough, Michigan State took it to them and kind of knocked Iowa, I don't want to say out of the race completely, but they're now at 2 conference losses, and they're going to struggle with it. So
I think if you have 2 conference losses, you're probably
you're right. Pretty much done when you look at how these teams are kind of stacking up. So we'll begin with some of the schedules. Wisconsin is
this is the toughest road to hoe, no question.
Yeah. I mean, look at this road. Penn State, number 3 Penn State at home under the lights. Then they're at Iowa. They got a bye. Then number 1 Oregon at home at Nebraska, and then home against Minnesota. So
let me just say one thing. If you were a Wisconsin season ticket holder this year, you got Alabama at home, Penn State at home, and Oregon at home. If you didn't go to any games, you could probably buy a house reselling your tickets. But
hit the jackpot, that's for sure.
I think that's probably too stiff a lift for them to get all those because they have a loss, against USC. So that's probably too big a lift. But, if they run that, they're in. But that's a big if.
And at Nebraska, Lincoln, that's a fun place to be.
Oh, it's a real blast.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Especially in the heydays when they were running the option. But that was really fun for defensive coordinators, I'm sure. But all right, so really one of the toughest roads for Wisconsin, or toughest roads too, is Illinois. Only losses to USC, so no tiebreakers. But if they win out, they could potentially be in number 20 Illinois, at number 1 Oregon, home against Minnesota, a bye, home against Michigan State, at Rutgers, and at Northwestern. So not quite as tough as Wisconsin, but they are at number 1 Oregon. So pretty key game for Illinois coming up. They got to get something done against the Ducks.
Well, if they win that game, it turns the whole thing upside down now, because now Illinois and if there's 3 or 4 teams with 1 loss, we could spend a 3-hour podcast on the tiebreakers. But if Illinois got to win over Oregon, and Oregon's got to win over Ohio State, and if Penn State were to lose to Ohio State, or if they beat them and run the table, then you're undefeated. But if if all of a sudden Penn State's got one loss to Ohio State, but Ohio State's got a loss to Oregon, and Oregon's got a loss to Illinois, but Penn State's beaten Illinois, I would commence drinking immediately before I could figure that out.
Tom, you're having fun with this, aren't you?
I'm just listening.
Huh?
I'm just listening.
You're just
because
listening?
It's going to get interesting. Just listening to Jay talk, I'm thinking this is going to be a little bit difficult to sort out.
So
Yeah,
could be.
that's one thing about the divisions is like there was a clear, these two teams played head-to-head. This team goes. Now it's, well...
So I know as you're coaching, you can't worry about all the other results, but there are strange results, and there had to be times when you guys were coaching, and you'd come back from a game, or you'd be done your game, and you're like, who so and so beat so and so? Wouldn't there be some strange results that would come in October and November in different places that are more difficult to play than people realize?
No question. And to think that they don't watch and your players don't pay attention, they sure do.
Yeah.
And so, the thing about it is, even now, 6 weeks in the season, there's some teams that are probably overranked because maybe they have, you look at like, a team like Ohio State's behind Penn State. Are they better than Penn State? We don't know, but they played Oregon. Penn State hasn't had that game yet. Or, so Penn State's a team that's won every game that they're supposed to. A bunch of train wrecks, car wrecks, and pileups have come, and they've just continued to weave their way, and now they're sitting at number 3. Are they the number 3 team in the country? We're going to find out pretty soon.
Yep.
I remember one year Michigan State was just okay. They went out to play Wisconsin, who was number 4, but Wisconsin hadn't really played a tough non-conference game, and this is late November, and they beat Wisconsin by 30. And we're on the plane going, oh, my God, we got Michigan State next week, and they just beat number 4 Wisconsin by 30 points. We looked at the film and went, oh, Wisconsin, maybe they really weren't that good. And we end up beating Michigan State by 20. So, it's a funky league that way.
The other thing, conversely, which you're going to get into, too, is some of the teams maybe had injuries early, and they lost a couple games. They're not so good. Then they get their better players back, or in certain situations, guys start to click. They had a young quarterback. Oh, he's starting to feel pretty good about himself. So now that's another issue that you got to deal with. So it's
constantly evolving.
And
weather.
Yes.
And weather.
Yep.
They had a bad game. Oh, well, it was a torrential downpour the whole game. Yep. There's a lot of factors.
Which is why, when you mention Penn State's winning the games they should win, that's important. Coach Franklin says every week, look, it isn't easy to get these wins. You got to just keep taking them one at a time.
Tend to your own knitting and take care of yourself.
Take care of your own business.
No give me putts in this league.
Yep. All right, so let's get to Ohio State. Everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people think, them and Oregon, right? So we'll see. They got some trip-up games in front of them that could happen easily, including at Happy Valley. Number 4, Ohio State currently 2-1 in the Big Ten, home against Nebraska, who, boy, they're smarting after the whooping they took from Indiana. At number 3, Penn State, home against Purdue. At Northwestern, Indiana, at home. That one, November 23rd. Put that one on the calendar. Who knew that one would be such a big, massive game? And then Michigan. Really, can we predict what would happen between Ohio State and Michigan, regardless of what the Wolverines are doing, even though they're down? That one's going to be in Columbus. So a really tough road for Ohio State, who lost at Oregon. The Indiana game suddenly looks a lot more interesting. And then the most fascinating team in the Big Ten this year with Coach Cignetti, Indiana, 4-0 in the Big Ten, home against Washington, at Michigan State, home against Michigan. Then they get a bye. They still have their bye week left, which you mentioned injuries, Tom. That could really play a big factor. Curtis Rourke is hurt. Their quarterback's hurt. At number 4, Ohio State, and then home against Purdue. Wow. Indiana has just jumped off the screen, and they just showed everyone what they're capable of by
not that
handling
it matters, but they will be favored in every game up to the Ohio State game. If Ohio State, whether they beat Penn State or not, if Ohio State loses to Penn State, they've got 2 losses in the league. So they're probably on the outside looking in. If Ohio State were to win that, that becomes all of a sudden a massive, massive game. But again, as you said, who knows what happens.
And good for Kurt. At least he didn't have to change a whole lot. Indiana, PA, and then he
that's right.
in Indiana. So he was okay. Just cover up the PA. He's good to go.
With a stop at JMU in between.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, honestly, last week was the first time I saw him play against UCLA, and then watching him against Nebraska. Really impressive what they're doing. I mean, they're playing really aggressive defensively. They've got skilled guys they're getting the ball to in space. They are going to be really tough down the stretch. And let's say they go and lose to Ohio State, and that's it. They're 11-1. They're a playoff team. I mean, India game day's going there this week.
We got some rankings, right? That will play into all that, and we'll see where it all goes. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, that is a team that could certainly do some damage. He is one confident guy, that is for sure. Every time you listen to him, and
during the broadcast last week, they asked Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt were talking about. We asked Kurt Signetti, he'd worked for Saban, and he knew Bowden. He goes, who's like a mentor to him? And he said, me. That's a confident guy. That's a really confident guy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And
I can tell you right now, if I would never answer that way, because I certainly would not want me to be mentored by me.
Yeah. Well,
we'll
move on. Tom and I will move on past that. We'll move on past that subject. But I want to mention last thing about Indiana.
I'd like to talk about that subject.
Well, maybe off the podcast we'll talk a little bit more. But intelligence, you mentioned, is one of the key things for a team in intangibles. He brought 13 guys from JMU. They all know his system. When he went into the transfer portal, he didn't go get just any guys that could just play. Guys that played specific roles. Guys that played, for a team that maybe didn't play a role they wanted to play with a chip on their shoulder. He went after certain guys and wanted to shape his team a certain way, and they're rolling. Okay, let's get to Penn State's schedule, which isn't easy either, but kind of, not quite as tough as Wisconsin's. All right, at Wisconsin. Tough one. Home against Ohio State. That's the one everybody circled. Don't worry about that one until they get past the Badgers. Home against Washington, at Purdue, at Minnesota, and then home against Maryland, who just beat USC. Puzzling team, Maryland. But anyway, so you got some issues in there. You got some things you got to deal with. One being you got 6 straight Saturdays. So you're not going to have these bye weeks are behind you. You're hitting this stretch hopefully really healthy, or about as healthy as you're going to be for the rest of the year. So Penn State schedule, anything jump out at you other than Ohio State?
I think the matchups with Wisconsin's defense, Washington's defense, and Ohio State's defense, Penn State's offense against those guys. Those are all, I know Washington's coming off giving up a bunch to Iowa, but that's a bad, Iowa's one of those teams that can run the ball against anybody. I think that's going to be really critical to see. The style that Washington plays lends itself well against Penn State's offense. The style that Ohio State plays lends itself well to matching up against Penn State. So, that's going to be really, the next 3 weeks going to be really critical. But again, Illinois played Purdue, and Purdue puts up 49 points on them, takes them to overtime. So as you said, you never know in this league. Just one day happens,
And you know how it is, all your fans, we'll get through those games. We'll beat Purdue. And they're easy games, And you start to hear, if you cannot get involved with the chatter, you got to close your ears to the chatter, because everybody's always, they've already put it on, you beat those 3, we're good to go now. No. Every game is going to be, and the more it goes on, the harder the game's going to be.
I want to bring a human element into it because, Tom, when we get into a lot of these subjects about, college sports, you always bring up the point, wait a minute, don't they have class they got to go to? Don't they have academics they got to go to? Don't they have this stuff? Look, there's relationships. There's all kinds of different stuff that is happening in a young person's life. Got a couple college-age kids, whatever. Those things happen. Things change as you get through the year. Maybe you're unhappy with a role. You mentioned maybe a young quarterback is put in. Each week has its own unique challenges to it. And as a team 3 weeks from now, or can look significantly different than what they look right now. But each of those individual weeks, you have to give it that respect and understand exactly what your team, your players are going through, so that you are 100% ready to go as much as possible.
Even in the locker room now, because with all the NIL stuff that's going on, and people, I got 100,000 from that guy. What did you get? You don't know what's going. You know what I'm saying? That none of that stuff in the older days. It was just,
Thanksgiving's coming around.
Hey, I'm going to training table tonight. You coming?
Yep.
And you got to stay healthy.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
the key.
if knock on wood, if a guy like Tyler Warren had tweaked an ankle in the second quarter of the USC game and couldn't finish the game, that's probably a much different game for Penn State.
Yep.
I mean that's those are critical things.
Yep. So we'll see how it goes, and we got one more to show you. That's Oregon.
Pope-mobile. Just get them a Pope-mobile.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Get them a class.
Invest in bubble wrap
and bulletproof glass and the whole 9 yards.
4-0 in the Big Ten. Number 1 Oregon. They host Illinois. That's the last team on their schedule that's currently ranked. At Michigan, home against Maryland. At Wisconsin, which we have already said, is not an easy place to play. A bye week, second to last week. So that could really help them before they're home against Washington. So Oregon, with that schedule, with their situation being undefeated, being number one, I mean, that looks like one of the teams that would probably represent the Big Ten as far as an odds percentage-wise. That they're probably got the best odds to be there down the stretch. But
that's if everything goes the way they want it to go and everybody stays healthy.
You bet.
Hey, but there's so many different things that can happen. It's
there's no guarantees.
There's no guarantees, and some of these teams get better. So you're looking at them right now, but they start to gel. They get better, and you're like, boy, where did they come from? Yeah. So there's a lot of different things, and we don't know all the health problems with different teams as we sit here. There could be a couple guys that they've been waiting to get back. Some of the younger guys start to come on. It's a whole bunch of different things that you're looking like, geez, I don't know if we want to play that team at this time of the year.
But
I wish we had them earlier.
Hopefully we have to break them down in the scouting report, the road on the show in a couple of weeks.
It could be really fun. I mean, no guarantees other than it's going to be entertaining. Yeah. It's going to be really a lot of fun, hopefully.
But you look at them and with what they have and how they've played and the intangibles and the things, they're a team that you really realistically look at that and say they could end up 12-0. They have all the people have the best shot to run the table.
They're carrying the Pac-12, the old Pac-12 flag too, in the conference. The other three teams are having a rough.
They're really built like
go
an
of it.
SEC team.
Yeah,
I mean and they've Ohio State's gone that route. They're going to be good on both sides of the ball up front. That's their goal, and then to have elite speed on the outside, which they have elite speed on the outside. They really can run, and their tailback probably might be the fastest tailback.
Awesome. Well. Here we go.
But hopefully we have to deal with that later.
Loved it. Love to be talking about those matchups. We got 6 consecutive Saturdays, and then who knows from there. Hopefully a 7th, which would be the Big Ten Championship. We'll see how it goes. That's our Nittany Game Week podcast mid-season edition right now. Tom Bradley, Jay Paterno, Todd Sadowski. Make sure you tune into Nittany Game Week program, and obviously consume all of our web-exclusive content at nittanygameweek.com. Thanks for joining us.